All right, welcome back to CanJam SoCal 2025. I am honored and privileged to have with me right now the man, the myth, the legend, Dan Clark from Dan Clark Audio. How are you, sir? Good
Doing
to see
well.
you.
Yourself?
Very good, very good. Happy to be here. Great crowd of people, even for a Sunday. You know, we got a nice group of people here listening to headphones and checking everything out. How's your CanJam been so far this year?
Nice, steady traffic, quite busy. Also having some fun running a project with Dr. Sean Olive where we're doing some research on developing new compensation curves for alternate measurement systems.
Very cool. Tell us about that. That sounds exciting. And you just gave a presentation on that not too long ago too, right?
Well, Sean did.
Sean
I didn't.
did? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But the fundamental issue is that when the Harman curve was originally developed, it was developed using a Gross measurement coupler, but it didn't have standard Gross ears on it. It used the what have been since called the Welty ears, which were some custom-made ears that they felt better represented the listener than the ears that were available from Gross at the time. Now, the challenge is that the Harman curve's been very widely adopted. A number of reviewers and review sites measure using Gross equipment headphones and compare them to the Harman curve. But the problem is that's actually not the right curve to compare to because the curve was actually derived using ears that the reviewers and nobody has access to except the original testers. So what we've done is we've gone and taken a set of those original ears, measured a number of headphones, and then on the Gross fixture we've replaced the ears with the and microphones with the current microphones and ears that almost everyone uses, which are the KB5000 series ears and the RA0045 mics. There are other mic and ear combinations in use, and those will have their own quirks and maybe require their own curves, but that's kind of out of scope for this project. And so the other thing we've done is we've made measurements of the headphones on a series of headphones, not only on the KB5000 Gross, but also on the B&K 5128. And the hope is that we can validate through listener testing that these curves are close enough to the original Harman curve tonally when we use equalization on headphones measured on each of these systems that they will all sound close enough to users that they're not distinguishable. And if that's the case, then we'll be able to publish a set of curves for the KB5000 Gross measurement fixtures as well as for the 5128 from B&K. And that will be obviously hugely beneficial because then when people see things measured against the Harman curves, they'll actually be measured against the correct curve instead of a curve that was designed for a different system.
Right. And the B&K is the big boy, right? That's the expensive kind of like...
Yeah, the B&K is a head that has a more complex acoustic impedance profile for the ear canals that are built into the microphones. And so while the B&K, or the old Gross microphone couplers were, Gross would say would be accurate to 8 kilohertz, and they could measure above that, of course, but Gross didn't, or B&K, too many names today. Gross didn't really vouch for their accuracy above 8 kilohertz. The B&K was designed to be accurate to 20 kilohertz.
That's impressive.
And to have a higher level of consistency across devices for that reason.
I believe Jude in HeadFi uses one of those rigs. And I think you guys do too, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And a number of manufacturers have both now. Yeah. And it's helpful both for reviewers and end users to be able to have a standard reference to compare against. But of course, as a manufacturer, it also helps us to be able to have a target curve that is representative of all the different systems that we use. So we know that if we take a headphone and measure it on system A and move it over to system B, that our difference between the actual headphone measurement and the target curve will be pretty close to the same regardless of which device we measure on. And of course today, since we don't have an official target for the 5128, that's not even possible. There have been a few approximations made, but they're just approximations.
Right. And so you obviously have always taken a scientific approach to what you do and gotten really deep into that. Not all manufacturers do though. Like some of them don't even print a measurement, and we had some questions about that earlier today. And And I didn't know how to answer that because I'm not a manufacturer. Why do you think some manufacturers will do like you do, take measurements, go really extreme to profiling the headphone, and then some will not?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting challenge with that, and part of it relates to how well people actually understand measurements of headphones. And there are plenty of people out there who feel like they have a pretty solid handle on it, and of course, many of them probably do. And there are a number of people who feel like if they look at a chart, they will understand what the headphone will sound like, which, I mean, to me, that's part of the story. You'll understand the tonality of it. You won't understand things like spatialization, time domain effects and stuff from looking at simple frequency response, but it is a good first order indicator to people who understand the graphs. But the real challenge is that headphones don't measure like loudspeakers. If you measure a loudspeaker in an anechoic chamber and it's a well-designed loudspeaker, the frequency response will be flat. If you measure a headphone on a coupler, it's going to have some variation of a bass response that falls as you go to the upper bass and lower mid-range, then slowly rises up and then sharply increases as you go to the mid-range and then falls off at the high treble. And it's been very common for me to see comments online like, well, I don't like the Harman curve because it's all bass and upper mid-range. And what's happening is that people aren't understanding that the way microphone couplers measure headphones is driven by the interaction between the microphone and the ear and the headphone in a way that loudspeaker measurements aren't, because it's all so closely coupled. And so while a loudspeaker that has a flat linear response measures like that, a flat linear response in a headphone does go something like this. And that's really hard for a lot of people to get their arms around. With a Harman target, if you have a target printed, people who understand what the target is will follow that. But if you show it to somebody who's not familiar with the Harman target, they will, often come away with a misunderstanding of the tonality of the system. So it requires a lot of education. There are a lot of people where the technicalities of that don't necessarily make sense to them, or they're not interested in them.
Sure.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword to publish the data.
Yeah. Okay.
So characteristically, we share measurements of it, and we're happy to do so on forums where people are asking technical questions about it. But we don't actually put it up on our website because
most manufacturers don't.
Yeah. So, we're obviously okay with sharing it, and we support sites that measure, and we provide units to ASR and to HeadFi and to other sites that do that. But publishing it is a trickier problem just from a communications perspective.
For sure, because you might just, that's the ultimate thing is like you said, it's a starting point for them to view the measurement, but that doesn't mean that's going to be exactly, even if they're good at reading it, is going to be exactly what they hear, right? Because I don't know as much about you, obviously, but I would imagine there is differences in people's ears and shapes and how they perceive hearing to an extent, right?
Yes.
So just reading a graph isn't going to give you the full picture.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the things that we're doing in this exercise with mapping the curve to different systems is we've got some in-ear microphones that were designed by one of our friends in the measurement community, Konstantin, and we've been measuring the response of the headphones at the entrance to the ear canal on everyone we're testing.
That's cool.
And building a bit of a database about the effect of people's individual ear structures on the frequency response of the same headphones over and over. So
cool.
It's kind of an interesting thing. We'll see how much variance there is in the community of listeners.
What have you guys learned so far, if you can share?
We haven't really analyzed it today. Yesterday and today we're capturing the data.
Oh, you're doing it now?
Yes.
Cool.
I just came down here from working in the measurement test.
That's cool. So we stay tuned, wait and see. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, we're looking to publish the results at the Audio Engineering Society meeting in Long Beach next month.
Sweet.
And
Very
then
cool.
Obviously we'll share them on the relevant forums.
Very cool. I love that. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about Dan Clark Audio. You had two tremendous headphones recently that I've been able to review for the Source of E and listen to, with the X and the Noir XO. Like talk about those a little bit. How have they been for you, and how's the response been? I mean, it's got to be great. I loved them both. So
yeah, this has been. Normally, summer is kind of a slow time for us, and this has actually been the busiest summer we've ever had because those headphones have just been so well received.
Absolutely. With good price points too. Very good for what you get. There's a lot of value.
Yeah, well, I've always had a philosophy in the company of trying to price products based on what they cost us to produce rather than what the market will bear. As a guy with an MBA, that's a little bit of an odd perspective to take, but it's always been driven by the fact that the reason I got into this business was that I wanted to do something that made people happy. And by trying to keep the prices as low as possible, even though we're manufacturing in the United States, the goal, we felt like we've successfully been able to get more headphones into more people's hands. And that really is why I get out of bed in the morning, is to try and make somebody's day a little nicer through music.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And there's probably never been, well, this, I don't know about never, but this is also a very challenging time to do that right now, because even if you manufacture in America, sometimes certain parts come from other areas of the world, so then keeping the cost low can be challenging for all manufacturers right now.
The tariffs have been very difficult. Fortunately, we saw it coming, and we invested everything we could in inventory before the tariffs actually hit. And we also bought very extensive inventory of magnets, which allowed us to keep in production when the supply of magnets was severely disrupted this year as part of the trade war. Eventually, if the tariffs aren't rolled back, this is going to affect us and our prices, but we've done our best to mitigate the effects so far, and we've been successful to date.
That's awesome. Well, that's great to hear. And
mostly successful to date.
Well, yeah. I mean, every manufacturer, you can tell, is struggling with it. So
I have to say, as an editorial comment, I can't imagine a worse thing to do to domestic manufacturers than increase the cost of the inputs into the manufacturing chain.
Yeah.
Because that literally means that whether we produce product for domestic consumption, or at least the imported products have a tariff that's placed on them that kind of puts us on an even keel. But as soon as we try to export, we now have a cost basis that is potentially 50% higher for every single part than anyone else in the world would have to pay for the same part. And since there are only a couple of companies manufacturing headphones in the United States, this really affects us pretty seriously.
Yeah,
it's just a strategic error to impose tariffs on inputs into the manufacturing chain.
And ultimately, we've already seen it with, because I work for a hi-fi dealer, the Source AV. We've already seen price increases from other manufacturers. So kudos to you for holding the line right now as long as you can, right? You were with having the forethought of grabbing that inventory and extra parts to make your headphones, but other manufacturers have already increased price, and at the end of the day, the consumer is paying those prices. So
that's right, and so are the companies. As a really big example, Ford Motors paid $800 million in tariffs on steel and aluminum, and that entirely wiped out their profits.
Yeah.
So there's no way. People have tried to avoid raising prices as much as the inputs have gone on, and I know this because I've talked to many manufacturers.
Sure.
We've all tried to avoid it in the hopes that the lawsuits that are currently in process will reverse the tariffs. But if that does not happen, then significant price increases and inflationary pressure are going to happen.
Yeah, it's just a fact. Yeah. We have a question from somebody, and it was related to the tests you're doing.
Yes.
So let me just let me add it to the broadcast real quick. So Zeramo1 would like to know, how soon could you apply the data to a new headphone that you're learning from?
Well, that's a slightly difficult question to answer. I think the first thing is that we'll be releasing the actual data and publishing the results at the Audio Engineering Society in Long Beach next month. Once we have the results, of course, I'll start using it internally in our processes. But as usual, I think the way I like to answer this question when people ask us what our future products are is to say that the best way to go out of business is to tell people about the wonderful things that you can't deliver. So
Good
We
point.
never talk about future products in that regard,
that
but
makes sense.
of course we'll be using the curves as soon as we have them, and assessing where we are relative to them.
Yeah, and you wouldn't necessarily shift your current product line based on that information, because that was his follow-up question, but maybe you might think about something for a future. Right?
Or there are lots of people who have access to DSP tools. Anyone
true.
who uses Roon has it built
Yes.
in. There are really nice equalizer applications for both Windows and Mac that fit between your playback devices, etc. And if we feel that it's of value or interest to the community, we can publish EQ curves based on the results, and people can apply DSP
That's brilliant.
to DIY it themselves and see how they feel about the curve, and maybe provide us feedback as a manufacturer, how they enjoy it.
That's brilliant. That was a great question follow-up from Zeramo1. And that's a great answer, because that makes the most logical sense, because it is so easy in Roon to do it. I love Roon. I use Roon, and just have the filter in there, click it, change it, and you're good.
Yeah.
So you could really test the waters with it that way.
And parametric EQ, when it's 32-bit based, is a game changer compared to the old days of I have 8 bands to fiddle with, and they're fixed bands.
Yep.
With parametric EQ, you can do pretty precise. And the one thing we generally suggest is that once you get above 8 kilohertz, trying to fine-tune EQ based on measurements is probably not the best thing to do, because the variations in frequency response at those higher frequencies are so extreme based on simple things like where the headphone is on the fixture, that you really can't apply that as a general solution to pretty much anyone's ears, because they're just going to have different they're called high Q features. If a feature is like a sharp point or a sharp dip versus a broad-based trend, those sharp features are called high Q features, whereas like a broad-based trend where everything above 8 kilohertz is 1 or 2 dB high is a low Q event. And the nice thing is that if you see low Q trends, you can then easily make a filter that says, well, I think for a lot of people maybe above 3 kilohertz, you might want to consider down a minus 2 dB shelf with a Q of 1. And with parametric EQ, that's easy to implement. It's simply one filter.
Right. Yeah.
With fixed band equalizers, you'll never get it right, and it's going to kind of really create a sawtooth effect.
Right. So I guess a question I would have is, when you first started modding headphones way back in the day, and then you started creating your own line of headphones, you were, I would say, infamous for being exceptionally better at doing it with closebacks. But what I've seen from the modern day Dan Clark, your open backs are now as good as your closebacks. So you've really just came up in the world. What do you think has allowed you to the Expanse is one of my favorite headphones ever. The Carina is one of my favorite headphones ever. The Noir XO is now in that price range, one of my favorite headphones ever. So you've really, I guess kudos to you, taking it up to another level. What do you think has allowed you to do that? Of course, learning and knowledge, but...
Well, part of it is open headphones are very different beasts from closed headphones in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things is that open headphones, it's very difficult to actually even get close to the Harman curve in bass response.
Right.
And that's just due to the nature of the acoustic impedance of the design and the fact that a closed cup can provide support and reinforcement for low frequency energy, which allows you to get the bass that actually is required to make a headphone sound linear. And we've just put a ton of R&D into figuring out how to make open headphones that can follow the Harman profile, and as a result, when you listen to our open headphones, tonally, they can be, like the Noir XO is almost identical in frequency response to the Noir X. It does provide a different listening experience. Sure. It's to me, it's just a wonderfully enjoyable headphone, as is the Noir X, but Noir XO kind of works a little extra magic too, in the way, by taking advantage of the fact that you don't have the retained energy of the cup. It does provide a different listening experience. Yeah. And one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that We're actually, when Sean and I have been measuring the Noir X and Noir XO, which we're using in the testing that we're doing, at using the in-ear microphones, the frequency response of the two headphones averaged across the users has been nearly identical.
Right.
I truly don't believe anyone else in the industry has ever accomplished being able to do that. And there are very, very few examples of open headphones that can meet the Harman target. And that's, I think, part of what makes them sound so distinctive.
Absolutely. I love them. We have a few more minutes, and one other thing I think I wanted to ask you about that is also very cool. There's a lot of cool things you're doing. So AMTS in your headphones was revolutionary when it came out. But now it's expanding to other manufacturers. So when I saw that, I think you licensed it to some other manufacturers. I was so happy for it. I was like, yes. I was like, this is amazing. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah.
And do you think we'll see, I guess my hope is we will see more headphone manufacturers, because it is an audible difference between, let's say, their version 1 of that headphone and then their version 2 with AMTS. It is like night and day, and once you're with the AMTS involved, sounds like a good headphone. And before it was a little bit,
we just had some great news on that. We got the final action from the patent office. The examiner, with some modifications, has accepted our patent.
Congratulations.
And so the patent's being issued.
Yes.
And we're going to be filing for our first European patent on that as well, now that the patent's been issued.
Congratulations.
So that's pretty neat. And yes, I actually think it's really cool to be able to license the technology. I hope other vendors take advantage of the opportunity to use it, because it does give an unprecedented degree of control over the inherent frequency response of the headphone, as well as the ability to control standing waves. And those are a couple of things which you can kind of handle with digital signal processing, but not really.
Yeah.
For example, if you have a standing wave-based hole in a frequency response, digital signal processing can't really fix that, whereas it can fix a peak by bringing peaks down. What do you do when you've got no signal because things are reflecting out of phase? And the answer is nothing, but we can now solve that problem.
Yeah.
And that leads to an inherently smoother high-frequency response.
Absolutely.
That has a more natural timbre.
And much more pleasing to listen to, absolutely.
Yeah, I like to use the example of drums and cymbals in particular. I spend a lot of time in music shops. I like to go into just bang around on instruments I don't know how to play, just to kind of keep top of mind how they truly sound.
Right.
That's the same reason I go to a lot of symphonies or orchestra, or small quartet ensembles pieces and all acoustic venues, is that's where you really hear how things sound. And a lot of the time, if you have a very ragged frequency response on the top end, especially with closed headphones, can be a problem. You get a very synthetic sounding high frequencies.
Right.
And perhaps for people who listen to a lot of electronic music or very heavily produced stuff and don't have an opportunity to spend time with live music, it isn't necessarily obvious what the distinction is. So the way I like to say it is that if your headphone's doing it wrong, your high frequencies are going they've got some kind of sizzle to them.
Yep.
If they're doing it right, they'll typically have some kind of tang sound, and it sounds like metal, and it's vibrating metal. And I had I think Steve Gutenberg told me this once. He's obviously a wonderfully acclaimed audio reviewer.
Absolutely.
And he used to work in audio retail in New York, and he said he knew it was time to get out of retail when he was playing a demo for somebody who said, "Well, I don't like these speakers. They make the cymbals sound like metal."
Well, that's funny. Well, because they are.
Sorry, apologies to Steve if I got his story wrong,
funny,
but that was my recollection from a little anecdote he told me.
That's awesome. Let's see if we don't have any other questions right now. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with our viewers, or anything if they're not watching it live for later down the road?
Gosh, I just want to say thanks to the community for the support. We've been doing this for 13 years now. This is on track to be our best year since we've opened the company. On top of a solid summer, the support of the community is just hugely appreciated, and thanks for helping us make it happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show with us. We appreciate you. Thank you to all the viewers. Stick with us. We have a few more live streams today. We're going to go till about 5 p.m. We will drop these in the CanJam SoCal 2025 impressions thread. So just keep looking there for the videos, and we'll usually drop them about 10 minutes or so, 5 minutes or so prior to starting the stream. So stay with us, and we look forward to you on the next one. Thanks again, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.